Hi everybody, and welcome to another video in my Composing Harmonies series. Today I'll be picking up where I left off last time in the series, so be sure to check out that one first. In that video, I discussed strategies for harmonizing a diatonic melody with diatonic triads, and I demonstrated how varying the harmonic pacing can produce more musical results. Those same strategies can apply going forward, regardless of the melody, but today I want to expand the harmonic language ever so slightly and allow for non-diatonic major and minor triads. Just to quickly review the term diatonic, here's a melody sent to me by AJ, so thank you AJ for this great example. The term diatonic refers to the diatonic harmonies that fit this tonal key area, and you can identify the tonal key area often by the melodic pitch content, but also by the key signature if one's provided. There are two sharps here, which tells me that we're either in D major or in B minor, though I'll assume it's D major based on how it ends. For every diatonic collection, whether we're in C major or F sharp minor, or in this case D major, there are always 7 diatonic chords, one starting on each letter name. So in the case of C major, there are diatonic chords starting on C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. And in this case, there will be chords starting on each note of the D major scale. So one on D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, and C sharp. Then to form those chords, you can either remember that each scale degree always forms the same chord type, major, minor, or diminished, or you could just stack thirds above each scale tone, using the notes in the key signature of D major. So my diatonic chords are D major, E minor, F sharp minor, G major, A major, B minor, and C sharp diminished. In the last video in this series, I only harmonized the melody with diatonic chords. Often this is a great place to start, but with only 7 available triads, 3 of them major, 3 minor, and a diminished chord, it can feel somewhat limiting. Look at all of the additional triads if I no longer restrict myself to the diatonic collection. Now, all of the major and minor triads are available as chord options if I want them to be. I'm not including diminished or augmented triads here. I'll cover them in a future video. So now we have the 7 diatonic chords, 9 additional major triads, and 9 additional minor triads. So all of a sudden, the options seem a bit overwhelming. Well, not all of these chords will work all of the time, or at least it's very dependent on the type of melody and the type of sound you want, whether that's a mostly tonal sound, or on the opposite side of the spectrum, very chromatic. In this video, I'd like to talk about strategies for using a combination of these and these. I'll start by using diatonic triads, then I'll look for places in this melody where I can change to one of the non-diatonic chords instead. Here's how the melody sounds without accompaniment. Alright, so following the strategies from the previous video in this series, I might end up with something like this, with a harmonic pacing of 1 chord per measure. I can always adjust this later, and I'm not going to discuss chord voicings just yet, so just the chord labels. And a few wrinkles to this I should mention. First, the A sus4 chord, I'm using that instead of a regular A major chord because an A major triad contains a C sharp, and this melody has a D on the downbeat that resolves up to E. But for that brief moment that lasts an eighth note in duration, there could potentially be a minor ninth interval formed between the lower C sharp and a D natural above. And if you recall from my video on consonants and dissonance, that's not an interval that tends to sound very good in simple diatonic harmonies. I could of course choose to resolve the suspended 4 note down to the third at some point in the measure, but I'm actually a fan of how it sounds unresolved. And the other thing I'll point out here, I'm choosing not to end on the tonic D major chord, but instead on the 4 chord, the G major. But if the composition were to continue, I think the very next measure would probably be a D major chord. Here's how this harmonization sounds with simple block chords. So now I'll see which of these non-diatonic chords might work as substitutions for some of the diatonic ones I've just chosen. Some of these will work better than others, and in music theory terms, there are chords known as borrowed chords that may be a good starting place. I'm just going to look at the first four measure phrase here for now. So the term borrowed chords refers to the chords related by mode mixture or chords that belong to the parallel minor key. The parallel minor of D major is D minor, so I can borrow chords from the D minor diatonic collection, so any of these could potentially work. Let's try these out. In measure 1, I've started with a D major chord, that's the tonic chord. I'm hesitant to change that because I still want it to sound like we're in D major. Even if some of the chords are borrowed, but I need that foundation of the tonic somewhere. In measure 2, I could certainly look for a chord other than this A sus4. If I harmonize to the D on the downbeat, then D minor could work, G minor could work, or B flat major could work as well. The D is present in all of those chords, but also, and this is very important, with all three of those chords, the E that occurs in the second eighth note of the measure wouldn't create a dissonant interval. Over the D minor chord, the E is the second scale degree, which sounds fine. Over the G minor, the E is the major sixth, so that's not a problem. And lastly, over the B flat major chord, we get a really nice sharp 4 chord, which to me doesn't sound dissonant at all. Any of those could work, although I'd probably lean towards either the G minor chord or the B flat major chord. If I'm instead harmonizing to the E, then any of these are also options. I'm saving diminished chords for another video, but the A minor chord might sound really nice. And the C major chord could work as well. I'd probably choose the A minor here. Okay, moving on to measure 3. I originally had B minor, but maybe now with a different chord in measure 2, I'd need something different in measure 3. Remember, it's all about the progression of chords and how the notes of each chord lead into the next one. Notice that with a B natural in the melody, I might have a hard time borrowing any chords from the D minor collection, because there will be a very obvious clash between B natural and B flat. So measure 3 is probably best suited towards one of the diatonic options. Maybe B minor as I had it before, but maybe a different one. Same issue in measure 4, that B natural in the measure just won't sound good with any of the D minor chords. After playing through these options, I actually think that the first 4 measures could look something like this. I like the root motion now descending by thirds in the first 4 measures, and the B flat major chord, which is a borrowed chord, a non-diatonic chord, gives this phrase an interesting color. I'll use that same process on the rest of the melody. For the repeated phrase, I think these chords might be nice. The first inversion D major chord in measure 5 naturally I think wants to go up by step in the bass, so the F sharp up to a G. I thought this would be a good place for that borrowed G minor chord. Then in measure 7, the B natural in the melody means that I probably need to choose a diatonic triad, and perhaps going from G minor to G major might be interesting. Then in measure 8, I'm changing the pacing here, going from B minor to A major within the measure. The A major chord at the end could certainly lead us back into D major in measure 9. Then I noticed that as the melody moves up by step through the next 4 measures, I thought the bass line could descend by step, creating contrary motion between melody and bass. Measure 10 might be a nice place for another borrowed chord, and so C major might work, but I think a first inversion A minor chord would sound better. Then in measure 11, the F sharp won't work all that well with a borrowed chord from the D minor scale, so I'll stick to the D major collection, and I think in going with this descending bass line idea, a B minor root position chord would work well. In measure 12, I think I originally had an A7 chord, but I think a borrowed G minor first inversion chord would be more interesting, and that places a B flat in the bass, so that bass line now goes from D to C to B flat in this phrase. And And I'll harmonize the last four measures similarly to the first four, although I decided to end with a G minor chord. So there's a real mix here between diatonic triads and borrowed chords here. And this is just one possible harmonization using these two collections. In the next few videos in this series, I'll be introducing more non-diatonic chord possibilities, and I'll discuss how you might go about using any of these. Let's hear how this harmonization sounds using simple chord voicings. Okay, so that's an introduction to non-diatonic triads, specifically borrowed chords. Thanks again to AJ for sending me this melody, and I hope you've enjoyed this one. I'll see you next time.